Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. Virtual audience, thank you so much for joining us. I'm always delighted to have my very dear friend James Rollins back to the Poison Pen. How long have we been doing this together now? I said 20 years at least, but
It's been over 20 years.
might be closer to 25.
I'd say closer to 25. 'Cause I
Yeah?
know when the first time Barbara invited me to speak here, I was like, I'm not good enough. I'm not. You get these famous
Still can't believe
authors,
he
and
said that to me. I mean, seriously.
but she coaxed me.
Head coach you. And now I can't get rid of you.
Exactly.
No, it was wonderful. We were, in fact, remembering over dinner. I'm the only person who actually drank at dinner. Neither of these lovely people had anything strong to drink, but I got carried away, which is why I'm not going to be a major part of this program. But anyway, we were talking about the fact that during COVID, Jim, well, you tell it because it's your story, not mine, about how your book tour suddenly got canceled.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember from. I don't remember COVID. Oh, you do. Okay. So, so we had this whole big book tour mapped out, multi store. We're going to
It's a
debut
Sigma Force
Sigma
tour,
Force.
though,
It was
right?
the last Odyssey,
Right.
and 48 hours before I was supposed to leave to come to the store, the nation closed down. All bookstores closed up, and my tour got canceled. And so I thought, well, Barbara has a ton of books, and I want them sold. So we talked and said, well, just come on over. And so I flew. I was the only one on board that plane, flying here because no one was willing to fly, and which is great, by the way. I think it should be always that way, at least for me.
Private plane at a reasonable
Exactly.
price, right?
I'm all for that. But then we decided we're going to do the Zoom interview anyway. So we just, we had no audience. It was just us talking and Patrick filming. And we sold all those books. So, yay.
We did sell all the books. Arizona was an interesting place for COVID in that if you were a small business, i.e., if you didn't have 15 employees, you didn't actually have to close. So we didn't. We never did close. What we did, of course, was we didn't welcome any of you into the store. We did curbside delivery or we shipped and all, but the store itself kept functioning. And because we got Zoom, it's just a magical moment, really. I think I did something like 300 Zoom interviews in 9 months in the first year of COVID. It was
Well, it's
amazing.
only-
Sometimes I did 3 a day.
That's the only way to get the word out at that
It
point.
was. And so, I was looking today when I sent out, mentioned the newsletter to you. There are 25,634 subscribers to it now. And this is a bookstore that does no advertising, has no paid ads, whatever it is, it all just keeps going. And I think that COVID, while it was terrible for many businesses, was actually and possibly a good thing for the store and for the staff and for those of you who are customers, because what else do we really have to do but read really great books and
Yeah.
not fight the traffic?
You know what else? You know what else was good about COVID? Back when I had my veterinary clinic, I told this to Soraya today while we were selling books today. I always jokingly said the perfect veterinary hospital would be a blank wall with a chute in it. And you would staple the complaint to the dog or the cat, and you'd drop them down the chute. The technician would catch them. They'd bring them to me. I would treat them and give them back to the technician, and they would carry them out. No public contact involved. Then what happened during COVID? That came to life. I thought, oh, I quit too soon. That was my ideal situation.
If any of you have been watching All Creatures Great and Small, whatever season it is, and I was thinking when I was looking at some of the things to save the little fox or to treat the horse, and I thought, my God, veterinary medicine has come so far since must be 41 or 42 in this program. I was so
We still put our arms up
horrified.
cows' butts, so not everything has changed.
Right.
On a cold winter morning, it's one of the joys of the profession.
So now he sits in a warm room with coffee and writes books. Right. I love it. So you may be wondering who this lovely lady next to me is. And I'd like to introduce you to Soraya Corcoran. And it's thanks to Soraya that we have these beautiful maps that are in exclusive with our signed copies here of a dragon. And Soraya, I found out at dinner, actually served time in the Navy. So she's well grounded to do maps and thriller writing, right? Sure, Mike.
Sure.
She didn't have anything to drink, but she ate the apple tart. So there we go. But anyway, I am delighted to meet Soraya. And for those of you here who have maps, did you sign all the maps today, or are you just signing them this evening?
No, we signed them upstairs.
Yeah,
We
You signed them
up.
all.
Yeah, just
Oh.
we signed the map in the book, so the postcards aren't signed or anything like that. Just the
Oh,
map in
okay.
the book.
The map in the book.
So the books have my signature, her signature, my doodle, and you should have 2 postcards. You'll have the postcards are somewhere in
Whoa.
this place.
Are we missing postcards up at the front desk, guys?
Oh yeah, if you're we sign the stuff that's being mailed, ordered, and stuff. If
Right.
you've got books
You
here,
can get yours signed
We'll be
this
signing
evening.
fresh today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's an inconsistency in the information that we put out, right? But anyway, we will get it all handled. But so since you all know Jim, I'm going to talk for a moment about Soraya, who actually is a Metro Phoenix resident. Good for us, right?
Yeah.
Yep. And maybe having a burgeoning career drawing maps for thrillers. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I love maps and thrillers. I really do. Because oftentimes I end up reading them with my phone, so I can figure out. In Brad Thor's book last summer, I was trying to work out how you could walk from Russia into Norway. And it turns out that you can actually do that because Norway overlaps Sweden and Finland and comes to a junction with Russia. So you can actually do that. I shouldn't have questioned Brad, but still at the same time. And so I think that if you have a map in the book, you don't have to open your phone and risk being distracted. You can just stay in the book, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So how did you and Jim make contact? Why is it that you suddenly have appeared in front of us, yay, with the Jim Rollins book?
Well, we have a mutual friend who basically introduced us. He asked me to redraw some maps from your older fantasy stories.
The God Slayer. Don't ask about it.
So then he contacted me to draw some maps for the new fantasy series.
I'm going to expand upon that a little bit. So Mahir, he does a fantasy book review website. He's always been a big fan of the God Slayer series and has been needling me for how many years since the interrupted series. And I'd gotten maps for the book, but I was never really that satisfied myself with the maps. And then so Bahir approached Soraya and said, "Hey, can you make these maps even more beautiful?" And he asked me, of course, is it okay if I have Soraya do that? I said, "Of course, yeah, go for it." Once the work was done, it's like, these are stunning. And at that point, I was just sort of beginning to couple together the idea of attempting to write Return to Fantasy with Moonfall, and actually, probably that was the final sort of little push I needed to actually say I'm going to actually do this. Seeing her maps, what she did with the Godslayer maps, made me want to return fully to fantasy. So you could thank her for the Moonfall series, because if it wasn't for that, I would have still been thinking about it.
Thank you. I didn't know that. Thank you.
She learns things too. But tell us again. I found this. I didn't again. I went to a website. I saw the work she did. I saw what she did for Mahir, but I never really knew her background. So why don't you tell how this is? I found it interesting. I know the answer. I asked her not to tell, but people kept asking her at dinner time about how she started doing map making. Please elaborate.
So I've been drawing since I could pick up a crayon. And when I started writing my own little stories, I would draw my own maps. And this was back when Twitter was cool. And I would post them there, and then it started gaining more traction, and people would message me and say, do you take commissions? Will you draw a map for me? And at first, I was kind of unsure about it, because I'm like, I don't know if they're that good. But I kept drawing them more, And then I did a couple just for friends, just as, you're lucky you get this one for free because I'm practicing. And then I started charging. So,
But again, you had no background in cartography, correct? It was all basically drawing, and then you did your Navy career was not, a spy for mapping out
No,
Russian installations along the northern coast, right?
no.
No, okay.
No, she was actually, if you recall from dinner, she was actually into the supply side in the Navy.
Yes, she was in logistics.
Right.
I listened.
I could hardly see you through my wine glass, so I just wanted to make sure you were on the other side of the table there.
No,
but
I'm trying to lead to a point that, besides, I give her, and I've shown this on Facebook and Instagram, the evolution of the map, the very crude, cartoonish, thing that I gave to her. Make this pretty, and she does. But besides she doesn't just carbon copy what I give her and make it pretty. She also looks at the geography and says, "Hey, Jim, the way this river's flowing, it doesn't make any sense. It should flow this way, and this should be." So she actually helped with just even the geography. Besides the beautiful work that she did, it was actually also contribute to the geography of the landscape that you guys are venturing through.
So is this likely to carry over into Sigma Force?
As anybody that read Sigma Force, it's full of maps and diagrams and creature drawings and strange things. So I'm sure I will. Our relationship will not end with the Moonfall series.
You may be here at the birth of a career, because there are plenty of other thriller writers who I think would benefit from really great maps.
Exactly.
Right.
Because most people just like they copy Google. Look, there's a map. But to me, your art in your book should be more than just pure information. I think that it should be part of the artistry of the book, and that she brings a lot of artistry to this series that wouldn't be there. Or like, for example, the narrator who Nicola who does the narration and the audiobooks. Beautiful. I mean, I listen to her and I go, who wrote that? It sounds much more intelligent than anything I put on paper. So there's a certain, when you bring artistry, another artist into your fold, and you see what they do, and they can contribute to the work. It's not just a matter of copying a diagram that I give her. It's she brings a beautiful depth to the story.
So here's my moment to tell you about the giveaway book I'm going to do tonight. This is my advanced reading copy of a book called 4 Points of the Compass, a nonfiction book that is absolutely brilliant. North, south, east, and west, almost all societies use these 4 cardinal directions to orient themselves and understand where they are by projecting where they are. For millennia, these 4 directions have been foundational to our travel, navigation, and exploration, and I add fiction, and are central to the imaginative, moral, and political geography of virtually every culture in the world. Yet they are actually subjective, can be contradictory, and are being completely changed by Google Maps because now we are orienting ourselves to a blue dot. And therefore, we are losing our orientation to the world in general. Now, to illustrate this, I grew up north of Chicago in a suburb called Winnetka, and the big body of water when I grew up was Lake Michigan to my east, right? And my whole world was water to the east, looking north to Wisconsin. Then I went to Stanford University, and guess what? The Pacific Ocean was on the west. And I never got it. I was disoriented for 4 undergraduate years and a year of postgraduate work. I just couldn't make that adjustment. But I think this guy's argument here that the blue dot is really changing how we relate to the world, and that the 4 cardinal points may be changing, that maybe we will, instead of being oriented north-south, maybe starting to orient east-west. This is a fascinating book. I recommend it to absolutely everybody, and I've quit using Google Maps as a consequence. If I want to get around, I think that they're great in an urban area where you can't figure out what block you're on, but if I'm traveling like through Utah and national parks, I want an actual map so I can see where I am and where I might want to go. So you can all fight it. Well, no, we're going to give this away according to number. But I really recommend 4 Points of the Compass. I think it will be a book that will really make you think about how you move through the world and the value of maps. But I am right, or is he right, that maps are basically oriented like north, south, east, west, right?
Yeah, most of the time when I draw them,
That's
how
it.
it is. I started playing with mine a little bit, and I would like tilt it so that compass isn't pointing north. It's like one side or the other.
And in fantasy, you have real freedom to do that, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And so, Jim, when you were creating your world, were you actually thinking of it in a north-south orientation?
Well, I mean, the story is set on a tidally locked planet with one side always facing the sun and one side. I know you know. I'm telling to them. Maybe they don't know.
We're educating everyone else, right? Sorry.
So it's a tidally locked planet. It's Earth. I'm not ruining anything if you haven't read the book because it's spelled URTH. If you can't figure that out really early, can't help you. So the one side always faces the sun, one side's internally in darkness, just similar to the moon, which circles our planet with one side always facing us, one side not. And there are actually real planets that circle their sun in that manner. And so in regards to north, south, east, and west, it got very confusing because, again, when you're dealing with the area that's livable on a planet of that extreme, basically you can only live in sort of a band between those two extremes. And so, north and south gets a little blurry because there's not really a seasonal change. It's not really a strong distinction between winter, summer, fall. And so, yeah, it did screw with my mind a little bit, just trying to sometimes figure out exactly how we're going to orient this world because it's sort of wrapped around a circle versus thinking like this. Most of us think of the world from an equatorial basis, and we think the world like this way. But because that's not spinning, I've got to think of the world this way. This is the way the livable climate on this planet is this crown around the planet.
When you think of the incredible struggle that people went through to figure out longitude and to actually make it a thing. Any of you read David Sobel's book, amazing book called Longitude, and if you haven't, I really recommend it to you. People to navigate, latitude was one thing, but without longitude, you couldn't guarantee where you were going. So I'm just wondering if all of those constructs, are being changed by the fact that a person can orient themselves in the whole world just by the blue dot without any sort of larger. In other words, we become the focal point of the world rather than latitude and longitude.
I'm okay with that. I am the center of my universe, so I don't see a problem, Barbara.
All right, so talk to us about, this is book 3, and Jim and I had a brief discussion at dinner. This is book 3, so we know that's a trilogy, right? Okay, so the question was, what are 4 books called? So we and then even extending
We
it,
didn't
5
know.
books was the challenge.
We thought it was quadrology, but then we learned
Thanks to Google, that it's a tetralogy. Now the question is, what's a 5-book series? Because in theory, what should it become?
quintology.
Right, but it's actually a quintet. Although I don't think that's true. I think that works for music. I think that was a limited answer that we should consider.
And I should be clear, this is a 4-book series. See, some people heard that because if you read the book jacket, it says the penultimate volume, next to last. But some people think penultimate means the ultimate, and it's not. It's next to last.
That's the trouble with Latin. If we didn't take it, we often don't know what it means.
And it was always, structured as a 4-book series. The first book is the setup. Second book is the main characters mostly venturing into the frozen eternal dark side of the planet. Book 3, guess where we're going? Hot side. Book 4, resolution. So, I like this book. There's I've done a lot of weird creatures in my books, as you well know. Marsupial people that live underneath Antarctica, poisonous piranha, dart frogs, combos. But I created a character in this one that I fell in love with, and you will too. gird your loins. That's all I'll say.
That's all you're going to say? You can't
don't wanna
remember
tell you
the
who it-
name, right? That's the problem.
What's that?
Can you remember the name?
Yeah, it's cricket.
Cricket.
Spelled different, but it's pronounced cricket. So you'll meet cricket in this book, and you will go, "That's a weird creature," and then you'll fall in love with him. And then I will do mean things to him.
For those of you, who might need a reminder, tell us about the main characters in the series. There's Nix and who else?
So the main character, there's sort of two stories going on somewhat simultaneously. One follows Nix and company. Nix is an orphan girl that's found in the swamp, was born blind. Because of a poisoning that occurs, her sight returns along with a vision of the moon crashing into the planet and destroying all life. Now, of course, she doesn't quite believe, is this real? Could this be true? Some of the alchemists of the world seem to suspect it might actually be happening. But, of course, no despotic kingdom wants to hear about destruction and doom. They believe that their kingdom is eternal. So they want to suppress her, and they want to squash this information, which, of course, if she is right, is not good, because the moon will crash into the planet. So it's her basically quest to find out, A, number one, is this going to happen? Two, in a medieval level of society, how are they going to stop the moon from crashing into the planet? And what type of skill can they possibly do to reverse that course? Because it's basically just a matter of astrophysicists, astronomy, thank you. That, basically I did a lot of scientific research for this book, and I learned about these tidally locked planets, and I posed to somebody, said, hey, if the Earth stopped spinning, what would happen to the moon? They said, well, right now the moon is incrementally just drifting away from us already. So if the Earth stops spinning, one of two things will happen. Either it will continue to drift faster away from our planet, or it will crash into the planet and destroy all life. Of course, it's not going to drift away. This isn't Space 1999. I'm dating myself. Did anybody remember Space 1999? The moon gets blasted out of orbit, becomes its own little satellite.
A really big asteroid, right?
What's that?
A really big asteroid
It would
if
be a
it
very big
crashes
asteroid.
in. Remember a really small asteroid, although fairly big for asteroids, wiped out the dinosaurs completely. So what would happen if the moon?
And what are they saying, like 2026? 2032, that there's like what is it? 2.8% that there's an asteroid that's going to crash into the planet.
But I thought there were people up there flying around who were trying to work out ways to detonate the astronaut. Please tell me that's true.
They said that if they were going to do that scientifically, it's already too late for us to do that.
Thank you.
Oh, that's really good news. Well, come to as many events at the pen as you possibly can in the next few years.
Then I better finish that Godslayer series before 2032. So I'm going to return to Soraya for just a second. And I pronounced her name correctly. That's good. 'Cause I've been calling her Soraya all this time, so it's Soraya. What I like about your work is that, and I don't know where this is coming. Innately, if I draw a forest, I'm just putting trees, and every forest is trees, but you make each forest distinct. I mean, I've never really asked you this before, but I have a bunch of different forests, and each one you draw distinctly different. And for some reason, I don't know how you do this. That's exactly what's in my head. How come? Where does that come from, or do you even know? Are we telepathic?
I'm not. I guess I don't really have a solid answer for that. I kind of think of it as in region. It would be in a real world. So evergreens, they're going to be kind of pointy, like evergreens are. More jungle type landscapes might be, I don't really know how to describe it, but not like clouds, but kind of like palms, like palm trees. So
See, in my drawing, everything's stick figures.
yeah.
Everything's pines. But so I turned it in, and she's like, "Oh no, how did you know that was even a jungle? I didn't tell you it was a jungle." But she makes it a jungle. It was just sort of amazing that, what she was doing with it seemed to be this weird communication going on silently that I don't know about. That was cool. Anyways,
Sometimes I just draw stuff on his maps, and he's like, "Oh, that looks really good."
But again, even some of the story elements have changed because of some of the stuff that she mentioned geographically. This isn't going to work. You should go this way. Oh, that's even cooler than what I was going to do in the book. Now that you've done that, now I can think of another way of bringing characters from A to B because of what you just drew. So this has been fun to work in collaboration like that. The other side of the story deals with the prince in the cupboard, Canth. Basically, he is the second son basically he's got a twin brother, Mykian. Mykian was born first by a few minutes, and so he inherits the kingdom, or is destined to inherit the kingdom. Canth, second born, is basically there as just in case we need you. You're the prince in the cupboard. We'll take you down out of that shelf if we need you. Otherwise, you're useless to us. So it's his coming to power on his side of the story and trying to support Nixon and company against the ravages of this despotic kingdom that begins to arise. And there's androids. That's all I'm going to say.
Androids, wow. Okay. So they're becoming more and more part of our lives, aren't they? Any of you driving around, watch the Waymo cars, the whole bit?
Those are wrong.
Yeah. I think they're actually kind of cool. I haven't been in one yet,
Nope.
but I understand the advantages are, one, you don't have to talk to the driver, and two, you don't have to tip. So maybe but anyway, I think increasingly we're going to see a human-robot interface kind of a thing going on.
Yeah, basically on this planet, the original, when the planet stopped spinning, similar to my own investigation, the scientists are like, the moon will either drift away or will crash into the planet. We don't know what's going to happen. And as this world stops spinning, there's major destruction. If the Earth stops spinning, nothing's going to be the same. So it's what's called the Forsaken Ages. It's where there's chaos, there's death. Civilizations are basically brought to ruin. And so this world is many millennia later, what arises from those ashes. But prior to that event, smart people thought, hey, we need to put some wardens in place that can watch in case the moon does something weird. So they put biological wardens, basically bats, which are already tuned to the moon, to sort of be as biological monitors of what's going on with the moon. But they also need somebody that can hopefully take care of that. So they have left sort of seeded into the planet these AI automatons that can arise and hopefully get the planet spinning if it needs to, or deal with the threat of the moon crashing into the Earth. But of course, AI, they never get along. One side says, yes, let's help humans. Other side says, humans are bad, destroy them. And that becomes another part of the element of the story.
So is there any actual chance that the Earth will stop spinning?
Of course.
Only in fiction, or really?
No, actually, in real life, we are slowly, very, very slowly, becoming a tidally locked planet. We are slowly our spin is beginning to slow down very incrementally, yeah. So eventually, almost all planets eventually will become tidally locked, whatever their gravitational body is that they're circling.
When you say tidal locked, what do you actually mean by that?
Tidal lock just means that it then just turns one rotation across one orbit of the gravitational body. So it'd be like our moon. Our moon is tidally locked because it's been around for a long enough time. It became in sync with our gravity well. All planets will do that with their suns. So we are beginning to do that with our sun. Eventually, we will, again, not anytime soon. The sun may basically burn out before this ever happens, but we theoretically, over enough time, if the sun did not die out, we would be eventually come tidally locked to the orbital well.
So there's some actual advantage to exploring space to see if there's like some other habitable planet.
Yeah, I suppose theoretically, 'cause I don't think that in our lifespan of our sun, we're going to see that the Earth ever becomes tidally locked. It's just incrementally it could. You're going to find out in the series why the Earth became tidally locked, but I'm not going to tell you because that's in the 4th book I'm writing right now. So what happens is...
All right. So in the meantime, catch us up on Sigma Force. What's
Not
going
yet.
on there?
One last thing about this book. So this ties to geography too. Is that because I was, making basically this is Earth slowed down. Is that there's little hints if you look at the first map in the first book, you know there's something called a southern henge, and then there's also the Shrouds of Dethla has a sort of a henge-like structure on the top of this plateau. And where I got the idea for the henge on the top of that plateau was that Stonehenge is the southern henge in our story, and that there's somebody building the equivalent of Stonehenge in Iceland. And I based the sort of the structure of what you find in the Shroud of Dethla on that, on the real Icelandic Stonehenge that's being built. And the one word we should not probably say in the presence of Barbara, Yellowstone.
I have a footnote to Yellowstone that I'm going to reveal when we
Okay.
get to the end of this
So
program.
in book 2, Cradle of Ice, there is the creche. It's basically it's a deep under the ice. There's a sort of hot spot that allows the ice to melt, and there's a habitable area where people survive and develop and evolve into this new environment. If you look at the way they structure that, that's Yellowstone. In the future, the Yellowstone that still exists, the caldera is what heats up the creche and forms it. So even though it seems like it's purely fantasy, there is some basis in reality in some of the map building that we're doing. And I'm done. Yellowstone.
So I was telling Jim that I read a long article recently where various volcanologists and other what's the word I want? Geologists have done a study of Yellowstone and the caldera, and have decided that there is so much sediment that has been deposited for so long in the strata above Yellowstone that it's going to be almost impossible for that caldera to break through it, as it is doing currently in Hawaii, is doing in Iceland, whatever. So Jim's book, in which there was the possibility of Yellowstone erupting, which if it does, will take all of us out right here, is less likely to occur.
You know what thriller writers say to that?
What?
What do you know? It's a wonderful thing to happen.
Especially if the person you're talking to doesn't
Thank
give
you,
away
Andrew.
the end of your book. Right.
So again, you started to talk about Sigma. I didn't know what question you had.
Well, I was asking you, since we're here talking about this book, and you and I haven't even discussed, is there going to be another Sigma Force and when?
Yes, there will. I wrote a standalone that's I finished in October, which oddly enough takes place around Halloween, which I thought was very appropriate. I finished it on Halloween. It's a standalone. It deals with witches, but it's basically the history and scientists behind witchcraft. It's basically there's the University of Exeter in October of this year, just a few months ago, when I finished my book, began a master's program in the study of occult and witchcraft. Now, again, it's not teaching you spells. It's basically teaching the history and the science behind the occult and witchcraft. And so the team that's in the new thriller, which it's called Trust No One. I don't know if that's going to be the final title. They are thrust into basically historical global mystery surrounding ancient text that gets dropped into their laps. So that's coming up. So I'm finishing 4th book, then Sigma after that. So that was always going to be Sigma.
Do we
come
have
on.
any plans for actually publishing the standalone book?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's already in the pipeline to be published. It's with
Yeah,
my
but-
editor right now.
But when? Do you know?
I haven't heard. I mean, initially I thought it was going to be, because I turned it in October, I thought it would be maybe December at the latest. But now they're saying maybe January, February. Now they're even saying maybe even summer. So I don't know. Maybe the Sigma book will beat it to the presses. I don't know.
Right. I just like to keep you all updated on what to expect from Rollins.
Me
right?
too.
Right. So what else? Many of you heard Jim's original. He's told it here, but I'm not sure all of you have heard it, about how he sold his first fantasy novel.
You've all
Oh.
heard this, right?
It's a great story.
I don't know you either. I've told this story before. Do you want to hear it again?
Sure.
Why I'm writing fantasies and thrillers?
Well, or how you transition from being a veterinarian to a published author.
Again, I am the only veterinarian that wandered astray, apparently, and writes thrillers.
It's James Herriot, but you can't call those thrillers.
No, there's ones that written nonfiction books about stuff, but no one has sort of ventured way off the path. I did, but I again, long story. Oh boy, told the story so often. I feel like I'm going to bore you guys if I tell it again. How many people have heard this story already? You're all lying. Julie, you know. Okay.
Notice
You've
I
heard
didn't
too.
raise my hand, but nonetheless.
You didn't raise your hand, Pam and Sue. Okay, yeah. Okay, so as I've explained before, I always want to be a veterinarian. This side of my brain loves animals, loves medicine, loves science. This side a little more twisted, a little weirder. I blame this on growing up with a Polish family with 3 brothers and 3 sisters. You should not be surprised with that, Sue. You've been here many, many times. As I've explained, to keep the Polish flag in your window, you had to have at least 6 kids. My mom had a spare. She had 7. Just in case something happened, the flag stays in the window. But to them, they were my early audience for my storytelling. My goal was to terrorize my younger brothers and sisters with wild, outlandish stories. If tears were involved, all the better. I called it, storytelling. My mom called it lying. Tomatoes. But I also read a lot, and that's like throwing gasoline on this side of my brain. So even though I knew from 3rd grade that I wanted to be a veterinarian, I kept reading. I got accepted to vet school, yay. Went through vet school, graduated, yay. Started my practice, yay. I kept reading, boo. Because this part of my brain said, you should write a story, Jim. You should terrorize other people besides your siblings. I said, okay. So I began writing short stories that never to this day will see the light of day, and rightfully so should never see the light of day. And based upon that great experience, I decided I was going to write my first novel. And I wrote Subterranean. Anybody familiar with Subterranean? That's the one that has the marsupial creatures that live underneath Antarctica. I'm ruining the ending. Sorry. No, they're introduced early. And so I began submitting it and got rejection after rejection after rejection after rejection. I would say I have to do that 49 times because that's how many times I got rejected. They were usually not kind rejections. Sometimes they were like just form rejections. Dear sir, dear ma'am, we hate your book. Don't submit to us again. Editor. That was the usual response, but occasionally some editor might give you a little pat on the back. Oh, Jim, that character is cool. Too bad the rest of your novel sucks. But trust me, that little bit of pat on the back, that's pretty, makes you happy. So one editor has done that to me. He's written me a personal note on a form rejection letter. It's just 3 words. This is unpublishable. As I said, got to respect it. Sometimes you just need a kick in the nuts. So I became convinced that I will never sell Subterranean. So 6 months go by, and I'm just getting rejection after rejection. I thought, well, maybe I'm not a thriller writer. Maybe that's the problem. It's not that I'm a bad writer. Not that it's unpublishable. I'm just not a thriller writer. I read a lot of fantasy growing up, so I thought I'm going to write a fantasy. Had an idea, began writing a fantasy. Was about 3/4 of the way through that fantasy when I get that call from that editor. From the agent who said, hey, Jim, cool submission. I liked it. I think I can sell it. And I'm going, sure, go ahead. Good luck. Because I've got, in writing, this is unpublishable. But, go at it. She goes, oh, but Jim, one question before we hang up. What are you working on now? Oh, I'm glad you asked. I'm about 3/4 of the way through this fantasy novel that I'm really excited about. She goes, oh, stop writing that. I don't like fantasy. I don't know any fantasy editors. Stop writing that crap. Give me another thriller. And I said, of course, okay. Because I had an agent on the line. I wasn't going to go ahead and kick them to the curb. Similar to my storytelling, that was a lie. I had no intention of not finishing that fantasy novel for 2 reasons. A, I was 3/4 of the way done it. The end is in sight. I just can't stop writing it. Also, beginning of the summer, I submitted part of that fantasy novel to a convention, the Maui Writers Conference. It's going to be my first writers conference. I'm not a fool. I'm going to the Maui Writers Conference. And they had a contest, and I submitted a part of the fantasy to that contest already. It's now midsummer. I get that call from the agent. I thought, well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to write until that conference begins, which is at the end of summer. I'm going to finish this fantasy novel and, see what happens from there. So again, over the course of summer, she begins collecting her rejection notices for Subterranean. And my response is, told you. Not really the great sentiment for an author being proud of his work, but, in writing, this is unpublishable. You're wasting your time, lady. So go to the conference. First day of the conference is a great, wonderful sort of a meet and greet tea. It's in the afternoon in Maui in a big conference room, and this is a big convention. 600 people are in attendance. That's just the attendees. There's also the panelists, the speakers. So we're all gathered into a ballroom in Maui. Now, keep in mind, this is the end of summer, and they require gentlemen to wear jackets because it's a literary event. You could wear a Hawaiian shirt under it, but you had to have the jacket, or they wouldn't let you in. If you had little leather patches right here, extra points. So I step into the ballroom, and I swear as soon as I step through the ballroom, everybody closes into little circles and begins to talk about me. I'm not good. To me, one of the inner circles of hell, cocktail party. I do not know how to break into a little conversation group like that that's already clustered in a tight little knot. You just like sidle up to one group and go, I like dogs. Just hope for the best. So I thought I'm just going to just sort of, scope it out. Just going to wander around. But it's hot. It's Maui, end of summer. We're in jackets. And 600 people crowded into a ballroom. I blame this for what happens next. Across this crowded ballroom, I see somebody I recognize. Now keep in mind, just a friend of a friend. It's somebody from Sacramento. It's his best friend. It's, we don't know. We've met maybe twice, but trust me, we're going to be bonded at the hip for the rest of this conference. That is enough of a connection. I've got my in. I hurry up to this guy, grab his shoulder, give him a little one of these, friendly, teasing him. What are you doing here? Turns around, it's Ron Howard, the director. It's Opie from Mayberry. He was wearing he normally wears a hat when you see him, but he wasn't wearing a hat at the conference because that's, gotta wear a jacket, not a hat. And he looked a little bit like my friend from Sacramento, but he wasn't. And he turns to me and goes, well, sir, I was invited. I'm going, oh, okay. I was just checking, Mr. Howard. Make sure you weren't gate crashing. So I, slink away, tail between my legs. Sweating even more now at this point, because now I got to worry about Ron Howard's security. So I circle a few more times, and I'm going to get out of here. But out of the corner of my eye, I see somebody I recognize. This time I circled them a couple times. Check their name tag. And it's Terry Brooks, who's the international best-selling author of the Shannara series. Now, he pronounces it different. He's wrong. It's Shannara. Look how it's spelled. Of course, it's Shannara. It's not that Irish little brogue that he adds to it. And I thought, well, if nothing else at this conference, I'm going to, shake Mr. Brooks' hand and tell him how much, enamored I was. How remember reading the Shannara series growing up and making a sunburn because I couldn't put the book down. And I'm blathering on with Terry like this, and he goes, I'm a fan of yours too. I go, oh, what's he talking about? If nothing else, I guess I've learned at this conference that Terry Brooks is an asshole. So I've learned something today. And he goes, no, I was one of the judges at this year's contest. And I read your fantasy submission. You got such a weird last name, I recognized your name. And I liked it so much that I invited my editor to come to the conference so he could meet you. Yeah, that was my response. And based upon that personal introduction, I ended up with a 3-book fantasy deal offer from Del Rey Books. Wow. Yeah. Hooray. So you know who I call first? My agent. Hey, I think I sold my fantasy series. I don't know anything about contracts, and I don't get screwed over by the publishing world. Will you do my contracts at least for me? She goes, oh, of course, I love fantasy. And she goes, oh, by the way, Jim, while you were gone, 2 different publishing houses had started bidding war on Subterranean. So I basically flew into Maui unpublished, flew out of Maui with a fantasy contract and a thriller contract. And so for the first 7 years, I was writing a fantasy and a thriller every year. And eventually, Rollins became a bit more popular than Clemens, and so I stepped away and began just writing Rollins. But I always wanted to return to fantasy, and of course, she's to blame. I told you this already. She was the push. If you don't like my fantasy books, blame her. She's the one that set me down this path. So that's the long story.
So what was the name you published those fantasies under?
James Clemens. So why James Clemens? Why James Rollins? That's not my real name. So the veterinary school and the University of Missouri, where I graduated from, was on Rollins Avenue. James Clemens, that's Mark Twain's last name. He
course.
wasn't using it
Hannibal,
anymore.
Missouri. How
So
could
they
you?
were all my little ties, little nods to my Missouri roots. So that's how the pen names came about. Yeah, with the last name, if you look at the copyright of any page, you'll see what my real last name is, and you'll know why both publishing houses said, nope. We can't publish that name. Give us something 2 syllables, phonetically pronounceable. There was apparently some marketing study done that they realized that if if a name is only 1 syllable, it's too easy to forget. If it's 3 syllables, it's too hard to remember. 2 is perfect. I'm thinking, what about Stephen King or Lee Child? No one has a problem remembering those names, but all right, Rollins and Clemens, 2 syllables, phonetically pronounceable. Is that what you asked?
It's a great origin story. I really enjoy it. So, anything else you'd like to say before we open this up to questions from the
No, I'm ready for
audience?
questions.
Okay.
I have nothing, because if I say fantasy series are basically one long novel cut into pieces. I find a little arbitrary places to stop between the books, but basically one story. And if I tell you too much about this book, it's going to ruin things from the first and second book. So it's hard for me to talk about this without major spoiler alerts.
Right. So, when taking questions, would you repeat them for the?
I will try to remember that.
And I saw that Chris over there has his hand up.
When you draw, do you draw them in black and white like they're in the book, or do you draw them like the postcards in color?
So I do draw in black and white, and then I usually add color.
Does he see them just in black and white or in color?
Both.
Or both?
So she does the black and white, and then I go, please, Soraya, make them come to life in color. And she does. It's basically only for my personal edification. I wanted it because I have posters of them. I wanted beautiful colored versions of the maps. So I decided, well, why am I let's share them. So that was the idea for the postcards, since I know she moved to Phoenix and that I had an opportunity to have her come join us. I thought, what a better opportunity to share the colored versions of the 2 new maps in this book. And they're also great bookmarks, because don't hate when you're reading a book, you gotta go look at that map again. Well, you got your bookmark. It's right there. Just pull that bookmark out, and it's right there. You don't have to go back to the front of the book. You can look right there. Julie.
I'm not asking you the question.
Oh, good. Thank goodness. But make sure you repeat the question.
Oh yeah, to repeat the question.
Do you ever hide anything in your maps, like initials or little Easter eggs in there?
Do I hide anything in my maps? No. Not intentionally.
Now that it's been suggested.
But I do study her map in great detail, and I'll see little details that just I didn't think about, and oftentimes that does actually become, to me, it's an Easter egg then, because I discover things in her maps that I just never were in my imagination, that they became parts of the key elements of plots or twists of the story. Yes.
I would love to know if there's any chance that we might at some point be able to buy poster size options of your maps.
That is totally up to her. She's more than welcome to produce poster-sized versions of those maps and sell them. I have no problems with that.
I think there's usually like rights issues and stuff with that. Like
Yeah, but the rights are what I deem them, so I have no problem with that. I mean,
And let me step up here and
the
say
publishing house does not own these.
No,
doesn't
they
own these
don't.
things. So
for many years, if you don't know this, that publishers own the the production values of the book. Jim owns the copyright to the text, but the publisher owns the rest of it. And very often publishers will hire artists to produce the covers or produce maps or whatever they all are. So for many, many years, the artist that produced the covers for Tony Hillerman's books, he sold his artwork through us. He didn't have to go through HarperCollins. I can't remember how many, I mean, it was a load. We had them in the store. They came in different sizes. People loved buying the covers. You know, they were gorgeous if you remember the early Hillerman things. So we can do that.
Yeah,
You know, if
feel
you
free.
wanna, if you want to produce them, we can
I don't
sell
want
'em.
to do that. So if you want to produce beautiful art, please do so. You have a website. Sell some stuff.
You own the copyright to the maps, not Jim and not HarperCollins. Or sorry, Forge. I'm in the wrong publisher here at the
Yeah,
moment.
not HarperCollins.
No,
That'd be very tricky.
no, it would be very tricky. But Soraya
But yeah, I
is
mean, to
the
me,
artist.
it's beneficial
owns,
to me because if someone loves your map, what are they going to do? They're going to buy my book.
Little short story map combo.
Yeah.
So Soraya and I will have dinner again, possibly with wine,
Yeah.
and we'll work this out.
I'm being shoved to the side.
With more wine.
No, actually, it's a really good suggestion. Thank you so much for bringing it up.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
I'm going to way at the back. I'm going to go wait. You had a question before.
I was just gonna say, I really love Nyx as a character, as the main character. Did you? I love the fact that you don't know yet whether she's what's gonna happen. Obviously, whether she's for good or for bad. Did you plan it that way from the start?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I know what her final decision at the end of the story. Basically, like even with the Witch series, it's a what's the 5-book quintology? My very first fantasy series was a 5-book series, and I knew the last line before I wrote the first line, and I know exactly what Nyx is going to be doing at the end of this series. Is the moon still tight? The moon would still be tidally locked, yes, because it's tied to the gravity weather. It doesn't really make too much difference what the Earth spinning does. So it's more so the centrifugal force and just changing changing. I don't know. I talked to some astrophysicists. There's a term for it in regards to which way that moon's going to fall if the Earth stops spinning. Yes.
Do you have a favorite character you've written, and do you have a character kind of based on you?
A favorite character and a character based on me. I mean, I each like different characters for different reasons. I mean, obviously, I'm very attached to Tucker because he's got 2 dogs, Cain and Abel, but now it's, Cain and Tucker. I mean, Cain and Tucker. Cain and Marco. So they're really special. They're heart bonded to me. If any character's the most like me, probably Kowalski, because Gray is who I wish I was. This combination of brain and brawn. Look at me, neither. You strip it away, Kowalski. So
many of you may not know that Jim's friend Steve Berry, who writes historical thrillers, and we've sold out of the Medici Return, but Steve is going to sign some more for us, actually created a role for Jim in one of his books. Jim is the president of Poland.
rightfully
Under
so.
his actual name.
He lost a bet. No, it's not
Right.
true.
Which I love, right? So, anybody else?
Yes, sir.
Were you inspired by any other fantasy novels, whether it be Tolkien or Game of Thrones, or is this entirely out of your mind?
Have I been inspired by other fantasies? Definitely. I don't think any writer really writes out of thin air, and I'll okay, I'll admit this. How many people have read the Band of Banners series besides me? Probably not too many. It's been long out of print. Julie has, of course. The Band of Banished series. It's the very first fantasy series. The one that I told you that Terry Brooks was enamored with and liked. Do you happen to remember the city where the main character came from?
I read it too long ago.
I will tell you. It's Winterfell. Does that sound familiar? So there was a panel in New York, and George R. Martin was sitting right here next to me. And I said, George, I can prove that I'm your biggest fan because I stole the name Winterfell out of Game of Thrones. I didn't do it purposefully. For some reason, that got stuck in my head, and I had to name this town. And Winterfell just popped in there. And he goes, well, when did you write that? Well, it was published in, I think, in 96 or 97, and I think it got picked up by Del Rey about 2 years before that. He goes, oh, no, Game of Thrones wasn't even published by then. So, but still, there is it influenced, of course, from many different fantasy writers.
And so many of them seem to be basically Anglo.
Yes, all of the sort of medieval society of Anglo-Saxon medieval worlds. So I try to play off that a little bit, especially in this book. You're going to see entirely different civilizations that are
But
locked in
thinking
the
back to
sand.
Thomas Mallory and the whole Death of Arthur, or Le Morte d'Arthur, the whole bit, that was basically medieval fantasy, imagining knights running around saving things. It's an Anglo-Saxon tradition. The one I really love is the Welsh one called the Mabinogion, which is the basis for Tolkien. And there's a children's series written by an author called Lloyd Alexander, which is absolutely brilliant. It's young adult, I guess, but if you read it, you can really see that this whole world. Then it's a very different world, the Celtic fantasy world. It's because it's rooted in Wales. It's very misty and very, mountains and mysterious and all the rest of it. I've loved that series. So I think fantasy. There are other countries that wrote it, but in the English-speaking world, it's kind of rooted in England. Yeah. I was there before they fenced it off. So, I'm so old I got to go there when you could actually walk around in it and look at things.
I'm not going to ask you if you set those stones.
I could have. Right. No, but I do think it's an it's an English or Anglo-Saxon tradition, but then, other countries, look at the Brothers Grimm or the French collecting fairy tales, but those are different than fantasy. Wouldn't you say? Are fairy tales? Well, maybe not.
Call them
Maybe
fantasies.
maybe they are all
And
fantasies.
they've got witches and spells and
Yeah, but a lot of the fairy tales that we know best are really German or French in origin, not English.
I think all fantasy writers, and we're basing it something on what we love to read, but we try to then look for those angles that make it ours. That's uniquely different. All my thrillers, I always they have a subterranean. I thought I was writing science fiction because again, telepathic marsupial creatures living underneath Antarctica. I thought it was science fiction. My editor said, "No, it's it's not in the future, Jim. So it can't be science fiction." Yes, it can, but whatever. I'm not going to argue with you because you're buying the book. Publish it however you want. So my thrillers I always describe as scientific thrillers because they have a strong basis on weird science. And so I describe this almost as a scientific fantasy because I try to build as much sort of real science behind the fantasy besides just the tropes of fantasy that you sort of expect when you're reading a fantasy novel.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
do
very
you
much so.
do you think of this as? Fantasy has become such a big thing. It's subdividing itself. How many of you know the term cottagecore? I had to learn it last summer. Okay, so what do you think it is? What do you define cottagecore as? It's cozy fantasy is basically what it is. Who knew? And then we have romantasy, which is basically, right, sex with dragons, sex and dragons, but not with dragons. Okay, that's romantasy, right?
Dragons need to get
I
some
read
too.
Rebecca Yarros, and
Come on.
I was trapped for an entire day at Logan Airport in a blizzard, and I ran out of things to do, so I went down to Hudson Bookseller and I bought a copy of Fourth Wing. Got me through my day there. But when I subsequently asked to describe romantasy, sorry, I slipped there. I always say it's sex and dragons, but not with dragons. But anyway, so we have that. But then what is epic fantasy? Because that is a term that I think is applied to what you're writing a lot of the time. So what's
How
the
many
difference?
inches between this cover to this cover defines epic fantasies?
What is it, scale? Is
It's
that
scale.
the deal? It's
Scale.
just scale?
Yeah.
So you could, in theory, have an epic cottagecore fantasy.
Sure.
I've got to, really think about
Or
this.
just one very long sex scene.
The New York Times last book tied itself in knots trying to describe, fantasy because it is become, it's the lead thing. As I often say to thriller writers, you're not selling fewer books; they are selling more, because the romantasy is kind of blitzed out the bestseller lists and whatever it is.
But
And
even
found-
that, that's even romantasy has a foundation on things that influence. I'm going to brag a little bit. Not that
Okay.
it's really worth bragging, but I was at Comic-Con as James Clemens back when James Clemens was still publishing, and I was signing books, and this young author, young woman, comes running up and says, "Oh, you're James Clemens. You know, I read your Band of Banner series. It was, you know, I loved it. It was so influential. It's why I wrote my series." And a matter of fact, one of my characters I based on Arel from your Band of Banner series, and oh, that's cool. Good luck. That was Sarah Mass who did Throwing Up Glass, and so
Single-handedly supporting Bloomsbury
Yeah,
Publishing as we
exactly. So-
speak. No, I know. It's amazing.
why didn't I get a blurb from her?
No, but
What
what's
was
really
I
interesting is the way that fantasy begins to subdivide, into different kinds of fantasy according to readers. I mean, thrillers to some degree do that too, and this is partly because book selling here doesn't work the same way as it does if you're buying strictly online, because they have to put tags on. If you're buying at Amazon or if you're buying at Barnes & Noble and all the books have specific tags in order for them to create those algorithms that tell you what you want to read. And so tagging books according to some label has become a really big thing. I'm opposed to it. I mean, I think that you should just love books for stories, and it doesn't really matter. What happens is readers silo themselves into things like, I only read romantasy, or I only read private eye books, or I only read whatever. And, I'm really sad about that, because I think it's great that you are here, those of you who read Sigma Force, but you're also here to talk about Moonfall, for example. Why shouldn't Jim write 2 different kinds of books, or even 3? Maybe he'll write a memoir, like, pretend he's James Herriot working in, in
Those
Sacramento.
horrible things will be happening to those animals, though.
Right, but I mean,
Won't
why
be
not?
sweet stories.
I think it's great that that you are so versatile.
To say, but I'm all for pigeonholing, where you should only read a very narrow spectrum of fiction, specifically James Rollins books. All for that.
Right, does anybody? Another question.
Yeah, have you ever thought about kind of going back to some of your other series and expanding, like the one you did with like Rebecca Cantrell and some of those ones?
So the question, I'm repeating the question, by the way. I think this is the first time I've done it so far. Have I? Maybe I've been just repeating because I've been trying to think of the answer. So the question is, do I ever think about expanding the universe of certain stories that I've written in the past? I'm sure. I mean, Subterranean, I actually have a sort of a rough outline for a sequel to Subterranean, where they go deeper underground, and the marsupial creatures are even more telepathic. But I mean, Rebecca and I have talked about doing a second go around in the Sanguinus series to continue on that, because I mean, I think when you write a story, you live it, and a part of it it's still there. It's part of it it's still dwelling back. It's germinating. It's seeding other ideas. I've borrowed other characters that have appeared. Kowalski originally appeared in Ice Hunt, so I liked him so much in Ice Hunt. I thought, well, he doesn't belong in Sigma, but come aboard because you're fun to write. That's sweet. Look, I write another check. Thank you. That's very sweet. Thank you. Yes, Sue.
How many more in the Sigma series will there be?
How many do you want?
As many as you can.
Okay, that is my opinion too. By the way, is that so, again, they live. They're never gonna. I already sort of know things that are going to happen to the different characters, and I got to get to that part of the story. So to me, I don't know when they're going to get to that part of the story. As you know, there's some bad omens surrounding Kowalski that were seeded earlier. So I know what that means later on, but I can't tell you yet. But we have to get to the story. So I want to get to those parts of the stories too. So I'll keep writing them as long as you keep reading them. I don't care if you keep reading them. I'll probably still keep writing them. I'll be some crazy person up in an attic. And then Kowalski said.
If you actually want Jim's books to continue to be published, you have to do your part. Thank you all very much for doing it this evening. You have to buy the books.
Yes,
Publishing is a business, it's a weird business because it's actually trying to marry creativity to business. And they don't mesh super well. There's an unpredictability factor to it, but basically, in order to make it work, you have to sell the creative product in order to create enough money for the business to continue to publish it. So it's an interesting thing. I think at the moment, with the world in the weird state that it's in, and I mean, not just here, but everywhere, that it's kind of like a return to COVID in a way, that people are coming back to books. We've had more book sales in the last few months than we've had over like 2 years because, we're better to escape than into, I don't care if it's a cottagecore fantasy or whether it's, into Moonfall or whatever, but in many ways it's better than being actually here.
I got thinking about the financial side of the business, and I think the solution is, especially since they're talking about not taxing tips any longer, that instead of buying the book, you should tip me. Save me a lot in taxes. Just a suggestion.
So we could just sell tickets and forget about books, right? We just create this as kind of like a theater, and you could tip Jim on the way out, and we'll bypass books entirely.
Put my hat on the ground, just throw the money in there.
Speaking of theater, I'm new here, so this could very well already exist. Have you ever been approached for like a movie for one of your books?
The Sigma Force universe is now under option by Amazon MGM, overseen by DiCaprio's Appian Way production company. Matt Serluck is the showrunner. He did 3 seasons of a series on Amazon called Abstentia, which is really cool. Watch it. I could say more, but
Like a series on?
yeah, there'll be a streaming series. But there's more information, but I can't tell you. So
The writer's strike and now the fire has really slowed stuff down in Hollywood, and there are many, many things. We've had 7 authors here since January, all of whom have got series that are either optioned or production. Joe Fender, John McMahon, James Byrne. I mean, a whole bunch of things. But because of all the backup and then the fire, even if they're filming elsewhere, the epicenter of the movie center business is still in Hollywood, even if they're filming in New Mexico or Vancouver or wherever it might be. So that's really slowing things down again. So, it's hard to say. But the great news is that Jim can continue to cash the option checks, right?
Yep.
Sort
That's
of a
always-
tip.
It's a tip, though. It's just
Yeah.
a tip. It's not an option check. It's not royalty. They're just tipping me. They like it so much. Of course.
Make you nervous giving your rights over to the show? Like what they might do with it?
I use this quote when everybody asks me in the past, because I've had things optioned in the past. Some things have come close to fruition, then they die away. So Hollywood's pretty fickle. I don't know what's going to happen for sure with Sigma. Hopefully it will go through. This is not my quote, but I like this quote. Somebody asked this author, "Aren't you worried that this series that's coming out is going to ruin your books?" He goes, "No, my books are sitting right on the shelf. They're not going to be ruined at all." So if somebody has interest in whatever is on television, they may be attracted to my books, and they're going to find out that the books are even better than the series. You always hear the phrase, the book was always better than the movie. It's because you can add a lot more depth than you can in a 90-minute, 2-hour movie compared to
Yeah, but that's where streaming
200,000
has
word
made a
book.
difference, because you can dig into something better in streaming with multiple episodes than you can.
Yeah, I always thought,
in a
to me, Sigma, I thought would always be hard. I mean, there's been movie options for Sigma in the past that have died away, and I think because it's just almost impossible really to pair a Sigma novel down into a 90-minute, 2-hour movie, because there's so many subplots and threads that need to come together. Basically, if you've read my book, I start with something fairly grounded for the most part, but by the end, I'm going to take you somewhere pretty crazy. But it takes me, those 500-600 pages to take you from here to here. And if you try to abbreviate that and do that too fast, it's going to feel like it's hokey. It feel like, oh, that's outlandish. So I need that depth to be able to convince you that there are telepathic marsupial creatures that do indeed live underneath Antarctica. Whereas if I try to do that in a 2-hour movie, you might not believe me. But there are actually telepathic marsupial creatures that live under Antarctica. Read Subterranean, you'll find out about it.
The thing about movies or television series is that it does it does bring stories to readers that might have missed them in books. And I mean, we're the Outlander bookstore, so I have walked this whole road with Diana since 1992. We're doing an Outlander event Wednesday night. I mean, there are people flying in from all over the world just, for that. It's remarkable. But the books are still the books.
How many flew in for this event? I did.
There's
know-
one
I
in
know-
the
I know
back.
Jack
I
did
can
too.
attest
Jack
to.
did
Yep,
too.
Thank you very much. No, I mean but the bottom line is the books are still the books. I love Craig Johnson's story, which you may not have heard, but Longmire was became a television thing based on Craig Johnson's books, and Craig tells a story about he had like a Longmire cap, like a baseball cap, and he walked into some bar somewhere in Wyoming or something, and the woman said to her, "Longmire," and Craig made that error that many authors make, and he said, "I'm the author of the books," and this woman looked at him and she said, "There are books." And I think that that's a great thing I think the best thing for an author is that it finds you people who love your stories that were never, or possibly hadn't yet gotten to. I shouldn't say never, have not gotten to the books. And so the books are a different experience, I mean, I think reading Craig is entirely different than watching Longmire, but there's no reason you can't do both. Just an example. So if you're here tomorrow night, you can talk to Mark Graney about what happened with the Gray Man, with, I can't think of the guy. Ryan Gosling, right, okay. So that was a movie rather than or was it a streaming thing? It was a movie, right? So, what is that all about? So everybody has a different experience, I think, that winds up with their books turned into stuff. On the other hand, I can think of 2 or 3 authors who've had absolutely terrible film adaptions, but the books are still the same, and it doesn't seem to have affected their readers. So works both ways. At this point, I think, getting off that topic, we should thank everybody for coming tonight and thank our author and our illustrator for coming. So I figure your butts on chairs are pretty much wound up at 1 hour and 10 minutes, which is longer than we usually go. So I did say that I was going to give away this wonderful book, which might make you think entirely differently about using Google Maps. John, how many tickets did we get? 33. Thank you. I'm going to hit you with this one, Saraya. We're going to give away this book, and to do that, we need you to pick a number between, don't panic, 1 and 33.
27.
Is there a winner? Oh, there's a winner. Could you pass that back? Thank you very much. Right. So thank you all so much for coming. This is where we ask you to move the furniture.